I'm going to paint Tahlia Vedra from Age of Sigmar. It's a commission with a candy blue and pink color scheme. It'll look like this when it's done. Step 1. Figure out the main colors for this model and try to stick to it. To save work down the road, I start by base coating absolutely everything. It gives me an idea of where I'm going to go with the model, and if my idea kind of makes sense. It's saved effort later. Remember, if you get a clog, to clear it with an airbrush cleaning needle, then pour it directly into the airbrush, dropping the dried paint directly into the cup, guaranteeing a clog. Because you're brave and daring. From here on out, I'm using flow aid instead of water for little lines. And of all of these brushes, I'm going to choose, the same one I use for absolutely everything every time. I'm going to paint these feathers half brown, half blue. For the first pass of blue, I'm making huge sloppy lines, mostly to cover up like 75% of the base blue on that side of the feather. With more white added, I can slow down and make smaller ticks. And from this point on, the uniformity of the ticks, both in width and distance apart, are both important. Diluted blue wash is going to cover up our shaky hand errors and get us ready for the next layer of little ticks. But first, it's the same thing, but for the browns. Sorry. If I need to scrub up a mistake, I don't want to ruin the base coat here, so a layer of Satan varnish first, then let's start on the higher lights. Same thing as before, just thinner ticks than before. Ideally closer to the edge of the feather, but to be honest, I kind of knacker that a bit here. You'll do better. By the way, I found these makeup brushes are absolutely sick for wet overbrushing. The big flat surface is a dream compared to a brush for big chunks of the wing, fur, feather, fluff area. I'm going to have to use these more when I'm painting just day to day. At this point, I give the fur a diluted earth tone wash and give a second dilute wash of the blue and the earth tone on the other side. But this will be the last one. I can remove excess with a sponge because the varnish, which is nice. You like that? And I'm on to the highest lights. I want the tops of the wings to pop over the shadowed parts, so some quick dry brushing, and they're done. Alright, time to start on Tahlia proper. I'm smushing paint that will be on the base into places I think it might reflect. I decided on 2 different kinds of woods here, one being a cherry or mahogany kind of thing, and the other a pine. I used my ink labeled wood, but the wood ink isn't good for wood. You need to use the chestnut ink for wood. You use the wood ink presumably for painting chestnuts, so I had to cover up and start that over, but that's okay. Also, the instructions say to paint the little skulls on display here before assembly, but I got it assembled, so let me tell you, these skulls, they're gonna be pretty mid. The cloth is going to start on a regal purple and work all the way up to a fluorescent pink with near white highlights. Some wild stuff. I used to hate painting someone else's color scheme, but it's honestly kind of freeing now. Like, I never would have done this kind of cloak on this model, or this color scheme in general, really, for this kind of model, but I don't have to feel guilty if it comes out kind of garish. It's not me. I have no liability. And if it works out well, then it is me. I'm completely responsible, and I learned something. The leathers I'm trying to keep rather uniform through the model, so they don't clash. Adding a bit of orange to the base and building up with tan for highlights later when I actually remember to finish. I do commit to kind of bright, almost cartoony kind of non-metallic blue for the metals here. In my mind, I'm thinking less stylized comic book and more Saturday morning 80s cartoon, if that makes any sense. I'll do some low-light glazing, but there's nothing wrong with dumping a bucket of wash on a model to start and then tidying it up later. Like every time I do non-metallic metal, I take it up to a certain point, get impossibly bored of the same task, and switch to something else. So I'll be coming back to this later to finish. Hey look, I remembered to finish the leather. I'm proud of myself. So what I'm not proud of is my face painting. This is a thing I need to develop. I just need to do a bunch off screen. Like I need to paint 20 little heads in a row and just get good. But faces are hard. Not like hair. Hair is easy. It sings to me. Look how pretty the hair is. I love hair. I could have been a hairdresser if hairdressers just painted the hair. So I'm not done painting, but I'm too excited and I want to do the bases. So the guy that I'm doing this for wants 2 bases for 2 different games, magnetized, so I can move the model. He's absolutely nuts. So I cut up some, he's not nuts, that's a completely reasonable thing. I cut up some foam for them both and dripped glue debonder over it to give it some character, which is basically the effect they use in Aliens for the acid blood. I picked up the finest, cheapest rocks from the dollar store in anticipation of this project, and first I need to refresh my perpetual stew of glue, acrylic medium, fine sand, and random garbage. It's like a toddler icing a cake. For the magnets, I just glue them on, then use an epoxy to make sure they're not going anywhere. Once that's dried, I connect another magnet to the one I just installed, then I use some epoxy sculpt to define on the base where that magnet is going to plug into. Once it's in place, I can just shove the feet down into the sculpt, smooth it out a bit where it squishes out, and just let it dry. Once it's dry, I can simply lift up the model, pop the second magnet off the foot, and glue it into the divot I made. And bravo, a perfect little magnet on magnet connection. I wanted these bases to look kind of like a blasted out sun-ravaged desert, which means a lot of orangey browns. Then I remembered he asked me to have it match his existing army's basing scheme, and he used this technical mud paint for it, so I brushed that over everything. And it's not a total loss, as the first coat there gave it a lot of visual interest it wouldn't have had otherwise. The nice thing with this thick mud is you can fill in any gaps that were missed with the epoxy sculpt, which is nice. You like that. The rocky ruins can still live up to my dream of an arid wasteland, so I drench them in Gore Grunta Fur contrast paint to start, then add more and more tan to the contrast paint and kind of wet blend that into some highlights. For the rocks, I mix sepia and agrax together, and I absolutely positively moisten the bases. Moisten the bases. Once it's sopping wet, I can take oranges, reds, and yellows, and in a very dilute way, just blend them into the rock, giving more realistic tones, while still mostly matching the original basing color. It's better now, okay? From here, I can do some light dry brushing, and look! Little stupid baby Corey doesn't know how to use the camera, so for the next little bit, everything's gonna be a little bit washed out. You don't like that, but it'll get better. I added in some unnecessary pigments that I felt calling to me, but they lied. I should have not used them, but it's fine. It's like a lateral move. And then I glued on some grass tufts, and they're done. At this point, I remember manticores have tails, so I take off the paper towel I had around it, where I was just kind of using it as a painting handle, like a little teacup. And I get to work building up from a forest green to a grassy green, and eventually a near yellow. For organic shapes like this, I really like to lean on sponges whenever I can. It just looks more natural, and frankly, it's easier than using a brush alone for big surfaces with a little bit of texture, so why not? Remember when I said I'd come back to the non-metallic metal and small details? This is the time to push those extreme highlights. It's just much more enjoyable for me personally to jump around like this. I also decide to add some mossy staining and grime in select places, but this isn't grimdark, so I keep it very, very reserved. These are just little touch-ups and highlights that no one's gonna notice, probably except for me. Hey look, we're done!